Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Not as Prescribed, Recognizing and Facing Alcohol and Drug Misuse in Older Adults, by Haroutunian, narrated by Bob Souer. Forward. Just 7 days shy of my mother's 60th birthday, the Ford family held an intervention. Betty Ford, my mother, a wife, former First Lady, breast cancer survivor, and a woman with a long list of accomplishments, was also an addict, and her addiction was overshadowing anything and everything she had ever done well in her life, and it was ruining mine. The youngest of 4 children, I lived closest to our parents' home in California. Our dad, President Gerald Ford, traveled a lot, so I spent the most time with Mom during the most destructive phase of her addiction, when she stumbled, slurred her words, fell asleep mid-sentence, isolated herself from friends, and didn't bother to dress until late in the afternoon. Still, I was clueless about how many pills she was taking, and the doctors just kept prescribing them. My beautiful mother, who had been a graceful dancer in her youth, a devoted and loving wife, an involved and caring parent, and a gracious hostess to world leaders visiting the White House, was now lounging around her new home in the desert, demanding that we pour stronger drinks. Betty Ford was addicted to alcohol, sedative hypnotics, and prescription painkillers, which she had started using during her bout with breast cancer, and to ease the pain of a pinched nerve in her neck. Mom and Dad grew up in the era of cocktails before dinner, and the combination of alcohol and prescription drugs was not 2 + 2 = 4. In 1978, the year of our intervention, none of us in the family even knew what an intervention was. We were hardly familiar with the concept of addiction, and we certainly didn't fully comprehend that it was a family disease, that all of us kids and our dad were affected as well. We knew something was wrong, and we knew we didn't like how hurt and frustrated we felt by her behavior. But even with a former head of state on our team, we were clueless about how to stop Mom from what seemed like a clear path of self-destruction. She didn't listen to reason. She didn't see what we saw. As she wrote in her autobiography, Betty, A Glad Awakening, "My makeup wasn't smeared, I wasn't disheveled, I behaved politely, and I never finished off a bottle, so how could I be alcoholic? And I wasn't on heroin or cocaine. The medicines I took, the sleeping pills, the pain pills, the relaxer pills, the pills to counteract the side effects of other pills, had been prescribed by doctors, so how could I be a drug addict?" Almost 40 years later, these words still echo through the hearts and minds of older adults who are taking mood-altering prescription medications or a toxic combination of prescribed drugs. Family members are still at a loss for what to do, and doctors are still prescribing addictive medications in an effort to help their patients. Not as Prescribed is a valiant effort at helping concerned loved ones and caregivers of older adults understand the dynamics behind these issues, why they haven't gone away, and why they are only getting worse. During the chaos of my mom's addiction, I was scared, I was angry, and when I saw a chance for help, I took it. I just happened to be working with a doctor who was also in recovery from alcoholism and who conducted interventions. He agreed to help us. I told my dad that Mom needed help and that we needed to hold an intervention. He agreed. Each of us in the family participated, even my brother Jack, who had pretty much given up on Mom. We each expressed our love and support, voiced how we'd been hurt by her behavior, and asked her to get help. She agreed, reluctantly, and entered the Naval Hospital in Long Beach, California, for addiction treatment. Before the epidemic that prescription painkiller abuse is today, before women felt safe getting help for the disease of addiction, and before the specialized treatment and recovery needs of older adults were considered relevant, Betty Ford boldly stepped into the world of treatment and recovery. Our intervention was a success. We got Mom into treatment, and she embraced recovery with a vengeance. But she didn't go with bells on her toes. In fact, there was a little kicking and screaming, at least in the beginning. Most people in treatment are resistant, even somewhat hostile at first, but as time goes by and they open up, a change washes over them. The courage that patients acquire in their journeys is beautiful to watch, especially as they face new crises and handle them differently with greater perspective. Sometimes the old behaviors creep back to the surface, but the new confidence will take over with the help of their higher power. Wonderful new relationships are waiting for people in recovery, regardless of age, and the most important of these relationships is with their higher power. The words that have meant the most to me over the years are in the Serenity Prayer: courage to change the things I can. These words changed my world and still empower me today, and I can't forget about hope, which stands for how our pain ends. When in the grips of my mother's addiction, I never imagined the pain could ever end. Yet it did. Getting my mom to treatment and then a life of recovery wasn't easy, but it was a miracle to us. What happened afterward was a miracle for the world to see, because we as a family went beyond our hopelessness and anger and had the courage to confront an older adult's behavior, despite the fact that she was our mother and a public figure, and that we could see her tears and her wrath in response. We were able to take that important step to get her help. The most concrete miracle, as most of you know, was the founding of the Betty Ford Center, the result of Mom's strength and courage, her passing her gift of recovery forward so that other addicts and families can heal. Not as prescribed makes it clear that not every drug problem is an addiction problem. Sometimes people are unwittingly taking a bad combination of drugs that cause myriad problems. Its most important message, perhaps, parallels the Ford family's experience with addiction. Every life is worth saving, regardless of age or behavior. One life in recovery can ultimately enhance the lives of thousands, including yours. Susan Ford Bales, November 2015. Introduction. Naming the problem. Over the years, society has adopted quite a few derogatory descriptors for alcoholics and addicts: drunkard, junkie, wino, sot. These words might stir up thoughts of slovenly, obnoxious, foul-smelling panhandlers stumbling through the streets, or dazed, scab-ridden youths lounging in a coma-like state in some god-forsaken apartment or abandoned warehouse on the wrong side of town. The stereotypical thoughts and images these words conjure up are true in some cases, but they are only a very small part of the picture. Addiction and drug misuse encompass a much larger group of people and extend far beyond dingy bars and dark alleys. The disease of addiction, yes, addiction is a diagnosable disorder, as you will hear about in Chapter 5, is what we in the addiction recovery field call an equal opportunity destroyer. Alcohol and drug misuse, from mild abuse to full-blown addiction, can affect anyone regardless of race, gender, nationality, profession, income level, religious affiliation, or age. This includes older adults, moms and dads, grandparents, great-grandparents, retirees, neighbors, friends, coworkers, even those who had never experienced a problem with alcohol or other drugs during earlier life stages. It might be hard to imagine a 70-year-old grandfather passed out in the recliner from combining his prescription painkillers with scotch, but it's happening. And for a host of reasons, it's happening at an alarming rate. Addiction in older adults may be unleashed by the innocent consumption of prescription medication or the gradual increase of alcohol or marijuana intake. It may be masked by the normal symptoms of aging or the need to medicate chronic pain. In this book, we'll cover why and how our medical system and our cultural and personal belief systems are failing the older adult population like never before. And you'll learn how to help older adults deal with their substance use issues, whether it's to learn to better manage their medications, as well as any alcohol or other drug intake, or figure out whether they actually have an addiction disorder and, if so, find the right treatment program to support their recovery. The scope of the problem. Drug misuse and addiction to alcohol and other drugs among older adults, which I am defining as men and women age 50 and older, is one of the fastest growing yet most unrecognized health problems in this country. Statistics show that 17% of older adults misuse alcohol and prescription drugs. When we include misuse of other drugs, that number is even higher. By 2020, the number of addicted older adults is expected to double to about 6 million. Widowers over age 75 suffer the highest rate of alcoholism in the United States. Addiction, whether ongoing or late onset, leads to increased hospital admissions, emergency department visits, and psychiatric hospital admissions. In fact, older adults are hospitalized as often for alcohol-related problems as they are for heart attacks, one of the nation's leading killers. Notice that addiction is considered a health problem, not a moral failing or a sin, but a problem that compromises the health and welfare of those it affects, the addict and at least 5 to 10 family members, friends, co-workers, employers, or anyone touched by the addict's actions. And a person doesn't have to be addicted to have his or her alcohol or other drug misuse cause physical and mental health problems, as well as concern among friends and loved ones. Why now? 4 major factors contribute to the large number of older adults now having problems with alcohol and other drugs. First, the number of people reaching retirement age is growing by leaps and bounds. In 2011, the first of the 76 million baby boomers turned 65. In what's been dubbed the Silver Tsunami, every day for the next 20 years, 8,000 to 10,000 boomers in the United States will reach age 65, and many will retire, with time on their hands. Second, about 50% of those who make up the boomer generation grew up experimenting with illegal drugs, even if only briefly. When careers and raising a family took precedence, most of this generation gave up their attachment to mood-altering substances. But in retirement or as empty nesters, a growing number of boomers are reverting to using drugs as a means of dealing with the stressors that can accompany aging, including boredom, health issues, and financial worries, as well as loss of a spouse, loss of identity, and in some cases loss of a certain degree of freedom. A 2011 Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration study found that the rate of current illicit drug use among people in their 50s jumped by about 3.5% from 2.7% in 2002 to 6.3% in 2011, indicating that the baby boomer generation is more likely than previous generations to turn to drugs as older adults. Third, since the late 1990s, when the medical community began monitoring pain as a 5th vital sign, in addition to temperature, heartbeat, breathing rate, and blood pressure, prescription painkiller use has experienced a dramatic rise in the United States. Worldwide, Americans take the lead, consuming about 80% of all prescription painkillers. Painkillers such as OxyContin and Vicodin fall into a highly addictive class of drugs called opioids, which also includes heroin. Since 2002, use of prescription painkillers has doubled. The result? From 1998 to 2008, the number of people being treated for opioid abuse increased 400%, and those who can no longer manage to get their drugs via prescription are turning to the street, where dealers have these pills readily available, as well as very pure heroin, which is stronger and often cheaper than pills, creating an epidemic of frequently fatal overdoses across the country. Fourth, older adults have been conditioned to turn to drugs for relief, whether taking a couple of ibuprofen to soothe an inflamed joint or an opioid painkiller for major back pain. According to a U.S. Census report, as many as 92% of U.S. adults live with at least one chronic condition. 41% have 3 or more conditions. Each year, doctors write 17 million tranquilizer prescriptions for older adults, including benzodiazepines, think Valium, Xanax, and Ativan, the most widely misused class of drugs among that age group. In 2014, Americans filled over 4 billion prescriptions at retail pharmacies alone, and adults over 65 fill more than twice as many prescriptions as those younger than 65. This is for a nation of 290 million people. Older adults may have been comfortable using drugs in their youth. They trust their doctors to prescribe only medication that's good for them, and they trust the television commercials promoting prescription drugs. And who can blame them? Pharmaceuticals have their place in the world. They reduce suffering for millions of people every day. The problem starts when the drugs stop helping and start hurting instead. In some cases, the drug combination, whether mood-altering or not, is the culprit. In these situations, addiction is not the issue. Toxic drug combinations, some of which produce dementia-like symptoms, are the problem. But when people cross the line from normal use to misuse, and then dependence, addiction starts running the show. And when addiction takes over, the negative consequences start piling up and affecting loved ones like you. Few older adults start out with a hedonistic urge to get high. Most are following doctor's orders, taking medications as prescribed. Others have been victimized by polypharmacy, taking multiple medications to help with various health issues, the result of seeing multiple doctors who don't talk to each other, coupled with a lack of patient advocacy to protect them. Others begin drinking or smoking marijuana to numb feelings of loneliness or depression that can be common in older adults for a variety of reasons. The effects of the recent decriminalization and legalization of medical marijuana in some states are, as of this writing, still largely unknown, but we will briefly explore some of the issues surrounding older adults and marijuana. Regardless of intentions or age, the results of addiction are the same. Addiction destroys lives and families. Recovery from addiction can reverse these damages by promoting a fulfilling life that heals relationships. Is this book for you? This book assumes that you have an older adult in your life whose alcohol or other drug use concerns you. If the older adult is taking 4 or more medications, whether mood-altering, prescribed, over-the-counter, or other, he or she may be a victim of polypharmacy, and this book is for you. If the older adult's drinking or other drug use has increased to the extent that it's affecting his or her quality of life and your relationship, listen on. If anything, this book is a healthy dose of prevention. I won't tell you categorically to stop giving your loved one his or her prescribed medications or to just take away the alcohol or other drugs, nor will I advise you to make that decision. But I will take you through the concerns you're likely to have about the person's use and let you know what to look for if you suspect polypharmacy, misuse, or addiction. This book will generally increase your awareness of the issues older adults are facing today around substance use and offer some steps you can take to ensure that your loved one does not experience or stops experiencing adverse symptoms because of toxic drug combinations. If the ripple effect of misuse or addiction has reached you, this book can help you understand what's going on and what you can and can't do about it. Addiction has a knack for confusing the hearts and minds of loved ones, leaving you unsure and angry. As a medical doctor certified in addiction medicine, a physician director at the Betty Ford Center, an older adult, and a recovering addict, I know. I see addicted patients and their loved ones every day. Many of these patients wind up at the Betty Ford Center, not by design, but by complete and utter accident. Many of them were following doctor's orders, taking proper doses of prescribed medications, and being good patients. Suddenly, and often after only a short time, they found themselves needing more and more of a prescription painkiller or anti-anxiety drug. In this book, you'll learn the tools you need to correctly identify and swiftly address drug misuse and addiction in an older adult, whether a parent, grandparent, patient, coworker, neighbor, or friend, and regardless of whether he or she is misusing alcohol, marijuana, painkillers, heroin, or other drugs. I'll show you how to take your loved one from what might be his or her lowest point in life and turn it into what potentially could be the best time of life. I will take the confusion out of harmful drug combinations, teach you how to safeguard against painkiller dependence, guide you through the addiction treatment process for older adults, should that be necessary, and show you what recovery and life free of harmful drug combinations can bring. Every addict has a unique story. At the same time, every story has common denominators with other stories of misuse and addiction in older adults. We'll cover some of those denominators and give you, a loved one or other caregiver, solid, trustworthy information that will help you take the next right action when it comes to helping the older adult in your life. Facts and fresh perspectives will move you from chaos to clarity so that, in your heart and mind, you will know what to do, and regardless of the outcome, you will know that you have done your best to help your loved one. Chapter 1. Older Adults in America, Driven to Drugs. You're listening to this book because you have questions about the alcohol or other drug use of an older adult in your life. You might be concerned that Mom's 16 prescribed medications are making her confused, that Dad's 1 martini every night is interacting with his heart medications, or that Grandma's dementia might be related to drug use. Your concern is normal and warranted. You might live hundreds of miles away and can only go by what your loved one tells you about her condition over the phone. Even if you live next door or in the same house, how can you be 100% certain that your loved one's behavior is only a sign of aging rather than a sign of substance misuse? When I worked as a family practitioner, a sizable percentage of my practice was composed of older adults. I treated several families with 5 generations: the great-great-grandmother, the great-grandmother, the grandmother, the parents, and the children, all under my care. I was truly blessed. From these and other families, I heard many questions about their older loved ones. And today, at the Betty Ford Center, where we treat people for substance use disorders, I address many of the same questions and concerns. Has there been a behavioral change in the loved one, as well as a physical change? Is there a question of mental competency? Is Mom addicted, or is this dementia? One doctor doesn't seem to talk to the next. How can I possibly figure out all of these medications? She keeps all of her pills in 1 bottle, and I have no idea what they are. She has a glass or 2 of wine or sherry in the evening, and sometimes you can't wake her up. Sometimes she's so confused I'm surprised she finds her way around the house. What she says just doesn't make any sense. I hear the same questions and concerns from families at the Betty Ford Center that I heard from the different generations in my family practice. These are the kinds of worries that plague families. I don't know what to do. We've been trying to care for my mother or my father, my uncle or my aunt, and we just don't know what to do anymore. No one seems to be able to help. There is a huge shift in Dad's behavior, and I'm afraid to leave the kids with him. And then I have questions myself. Are we, as physicians, creating bodies and minds that are imprisoning our patients? Are the chemicals we prescribe or the legal chemicals that patients can purchase capable of wrapping up the mind, the heart, and the soul of patients so tightly that they are completely withdrawn from the real world? And if that is the case, how do we deal with it? How do we help families save these wonderful citizens who have given us so much and now seem so desperately lost in these later stages of life? We can't just throw them away. I know that we can save them. It requires patience, it requires tolerance, and it requires an investigative perseverance worthy of Sherlock Holmes. But we can make a difference in their lives, and this book is all about hope and revitalization. To revitalize is to bring life back into someone who has been lost. Let's walk this journey together in the pages that follow to help revitalize you and your loved one, who may possibly be caught up, even unwittingly, in the disease of addiction. It's never too late. Compared to their younger counterparts, older adults have a greater chance of recovering from drug misuse. Older adults who go through addiction treatment have some of the best success rates for staying in long-term recovery. Leading your older loved one to a clean and sober life and helping him or her establish a healthy relationship with necessary prescription drugs, regardless of age, is worth your time and one of the greatest gifts you will ever give. In the introduction, I established that drug use is prolific among older adults, but certainly not every older adult has an issue with the medications he or she takes on a daily basis. Let's look at the wide expanse of possibilities and see where your loved one might fall on the continuum. The continuum, from awareness to severe addiction. A lot of terms get bandied about when it comes to addiction. There's substance abuse, addiction, dependence, problem drinking, drug misuse. I'm sure you can think of more. But what does each term mean, and what's the difference between abuse and dependence, misuse and addiction, or any other term? How practitioners describe drug use changes in part when the American Psychiatric Association publishes an updated version of its Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, known in the mental health field as the DSM. The DSM is a Bible of sorts for mental health practitioners. It categorizes, codes, and defines all known mental health disorders to help clinicians make a correct diagnosis. It also ensures that the diagnosis is standard across all practices, from the doctor who's working independently in the mountains of Vermont to a psychiatrist working in a large hospital setting in a megalopolis such as Los Angeles. When the DSM's definition of a disorder changes, so too can the terminology. DSM-5, the version in print at the time of this writing, uses the term substance use disorder and breaks it down into mild, moderate, and severe. A person who's mildly misusing substances might be drinking 2 or 3 glasses of wine every evening and getting anxious about dinner time when her body begins craving alcohol. A person considered to have a severe substance use disorder might wake up in the morning plotting how to get more of a drug, and may have lost a job or home or committed a crime. Typically, the more advanced the substance abuse, the more severe the consequences. But again, I emphasize that everyone is unique. The point is that a person doesn't need to be addicted to have substance misuse adversely affect her life, and a person can still be addicted without hitting rock bottom or having her life in shambles. Substance misuse happens on a continuum, with addiction at the far end, and addiction looks different at different stages. I'm not asking you to diagnose anyone, and I certainly can't diagnose your loved one or patient through this book, so for our purposes, I simply need you to understand that this book covers a wide continuum. Regardless of whether I'm using the term use, misuse, addiction, alcoholism, addicted to alcohol, or substance abuse, understand that I am still speaking to you about the older adult you care about, even if his or her relationship with mood-altering substances turns out not to be problematic. I emphasize this point because I understand that you are listening to this book for helpful information, not to be told your dad is an addict when he's not. In short, this book does not assume that an older adult is an addict. This book is about awareness. If you take away anything from this book, I hope it is that the scope of the problem is wide and the continuum of substance use leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Once you understand that, you can determine your next best steps, if any, based on your unique situation. From their perspective, better living through chemistry. When I talk about older adults, I'm not just talking about boomers. The range that I'm using of people age 50 and older includes 3 to 4 generations: the GI generation, born 1901 to 1924, silent generation, born 1925 to 1945, baby boomer generation, born 1946 to 1964, and Generation X, or what some call the 13th generation, born 1965 to 1984. Because they identify as the 13th generation since the founding of the United States. Growing up, each of these generations was inundated with societal messages regarding how to behave, what constitutes shameful behavior, and how to view drugs, alcoholism, and other addictions. All of this and much, much more forms how a generation in general views itself in relation to mood-altering drugs, especially to addiction, and why someone might not want to eagerly run up to an AA podium and proudly declare that he is an alcoholic. What follows simply scratches the surface of generational beliefs and the cultural mindset around drug use, including prescription drugs and addiction in the United States. But I hope it will give you some insight into some of your loved one's behaviors, such as having that morning martini in isolation, refusing to go to the doctor when you've suggested he may need help cutting back on his pain medication, or falling asleep behind the wheel after smoking marijuana. The stigma associated with being an addict runs high in our society, especially among those born before World War II. This generation grew up associating alcoholism with town drunks and opioid addiction with low-life criminals, not with drug and alcohol prevention programs and treatment centers that address patients with dignity and respect. Most people from this era who suffer from alcohol or drug addiction do not see themselves as having fallen that low. If they suspect that they are an alcoholic or addict, admitting it would be too shameful. Instead, they pull themselves up by their bootstraps and deal with it themselves, as they have been taught to deal with all of life's problems. But they and their families soon discover that addiction is not like other life problems. It's a disease that invades the body and life not only of the addicted, but also of loved ones and caregivers. Yet for most older adults who were born in
Sample complete. Ready to continue?